So there's a picture that they use of Chad and Tammy in Midway, Utah. He's got his arm around her. That was the last family get together we had.
So you were there?
I was there. We were all there. That was, I think that was to celebrate Matt's mom's birthday, because that was June. That was June 2019. Tammy was kind of AWOL at that. Like we had a big luau dinner that she didn't come to. She was asleep in the room. I did notice when I saw her at church, she was head down. And I thought she's going through one of her depressive episodes, is what I thought. At church, they weren't sitting where they normally sat. Chad started sitting in the very back. We sat more in the front. I did have ward members tell me, did you notice Tammy was not sitting by Chad anymore at church? I had not noticed that because he was back there. And I tried not to look at that guy if I didn't have to. So anyway, I could see that she wasn't doing well, the little that I did see her. So at this family event, she didn't go to that dinner. And Chad kept himself apart. He was not mingling with us. He was kind of over there at this dinner. I do remember I was going to go on a family history trip with my daughter back east. We were talking about, like, with Paul and his wife, Emily. Chad was listening and said, "You're going on a family history trip? Just you and Maggie?" And I said, "Yep." Does it? So that's June. August, and I have video of this. It was when my son, Isaac, was coming home from his mission. And we had a party. This was homecoming. We had a party. It was on Chad's birthday. And because I called Chad and said, "Hey, we're doing this get together. I know it's your birthday. If you don't want to come, I get it." "No, we'll be there." And we did do a little Eagle Scout thing for my younger two boys. Both got their Eagle Scouts. We kind of combined the whole thing. I have video of Chad and Tammy on his birthday. So this is August 2019.
So just a few months, couple months.
Charles is already dead.
Charles is already dead. There's an affair happening. Yeah, he died July 11th, 2019. An affair is happening with Chad and Lori. This is before Tammy's died.
So this is August 11th, Chad's birthday, a month after Charles has been shot.
Wow, okay.
Chad's sitting there next to his dad. Here's Tammy. She's not making eye contact with anybody. She's very quiet. Garth and Emma are there. Everyone else seems to be fine. Chad's fine. They sing happy birthday to Chad. And so that's the last interaction that I really, where we're all together as a family. So it's so crazy to me that just weeks after he's sitting on my back deck, that Tylee's murdered. Then JJ. My next door neighbor dies a week after we find out when Tylee or JJ, that's weird. And then Tammy. So then she's shot at. I wasn't on Facebook at the time, didn't know that had happened until later. Someone said, "Mom, did you know that happened to Tammy?" And I was like, "I had no idea." So I read her Facebook post. Then we're in Vegas and we get this call that Tammy's gone. And I called him, was very unsettled, went to the funeral. I'm standing at the viewing. I'm standing next to Matt's mom, looking at Tammy. And I said, "Sheila, my brain is not going to let this go. What happened to her?" And Sheila said, "All I know is that Emma said she had pink foam coming out of her mouth." So we do the funeral. We buzz home. We go to the memorial. No one in the family came to the memorial because they'd just done the funeral, but we live in the area, so we went to the memorial. All of this praise and all of this stuff about Tammy, and that's when I leaned to Matt and said, "That's not who we knew." And my son saying, "Yeah, she never spoke to me once." That was hard. I was sad. I was confused. And it was interesting. There were a few people there. I thought, I'm getting death glares here. Why? I'm feeling uncomfortable here.
As in people were seeing you and not liking you.
Yeah. And I don't know if I just was creating that but that's how I felt. So time's going on. In the meantime, Matt and I'm just like, this, I am not okay. I know I'm sad over Tammy, but I'm not okay. And then I get a phone call. This is 3 weeks after Tammy's gone. I get a phone call from our Relief Society president, who is tight with Chad and Tammy. And she said, do you have a minute? And I said, yeah. And she said, I need to talk to you about Chad. And my first thing I said, does he have a girlfriend? And she said, Heather, he's married. I lost it. And he killed her. He killed her. I knew it. And she's like, no. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm really upset. He brought her to my house. He was introducing her to people.
We introduced her to the kids.
After the memorial. They went to
memorial.
Lori's, her townhome. So I'm hysterical. And she said, I don't think your in-laws know. I don't think Chad's parents know. So, and I have some strong opinions about this Relief Society president, and I won't go into that. But I called Matt. Matt was in South America at the time. He and I have been church service missionaries for the church in the wheelchair initiative, where and this is mainly Matt's thing. I would go when I could, because 10 years, my kids were little. Matt was in South America. He was in Paraguay. I called him and I said, you need to sit down. And I said, Chad's married. It was like Matt was standing. It was the feeling that we had. I said, Matt, he did it. He did something to her. He's like, oh my gosh, I got to call my parents. So he called his mom. His dad wasn't home. And he said, Mom, Chad's married. Did you know this? And she said, we just got home from meeting her. Chad had called his parents. They were down in Capitol Reef. They go down there a lot. They were on a getaway. Chad said to his mom and dad, I've met someone that I want you to meet because I think I'm going to marry her. Lied to him. I think I'm going to marry her. Oh. So they get in their car and they buzz up to Rexburg. I had no idea they were there. And Chad introduced Lori to his mom and dad and said, oh, I already did marry her. They're married. And he said specifically, don't tell Heather. Don't tell Heather. Don't talk to Heather and Matt about this. Don't tell Heather. Yes. So Matt's mom was very tight-lipped and said, I can't say anything. Let me wait till your dad gets home. And Matt was pissed. And he said, you tell me what is going on. This is my brother. What's going on? And she said, I'm not going to talk about this till your dad gets here. And then she turned it and said, let's talk about your imperfect wife. And proceeded to go through from the last 20 years, she brought up all kinds of things about me.
That was her response to Chad getting married?
Completely tearing me down to my husband. And Matt kept saying, you were talking about my wife. This is my wife. And Matt said, ultimately, I ended up hanging up on my mom. He called me and I could hear it. He said, I just had the worst conversation I have ever had. He was devastated. And he said, I'm not going to tell you the things that she said. And I said, why is this even about me? What? This isn't about me. We're trying to figure out what the heck Chad did. who's he married to? And he said, he's like, my brain's not even functioning right now. I don't know what just happened. So, and the crazy thing is, I skipped this. So at the memorial for Tammy in Rexburg, Chad came up to us after and he said, I can't stay in that house where Tammy died. I can't sleep in that bed. I've got a friend in town I'm going to move in with. And Seth is standing there and he said, yeah, we're going to move into the house because our apartment's haunted. And I went, what? Wait. And he said, yeah, there's noises. So that just shows you what they've grown up with, that there's lots of stuff with spirits and demons and blah, blah. So I was like, okay. I said, I can see that if, it's hard to be at the house. He moves out. A couple days after that, we're told he's left for Hawaii.
So when you say he moved out, do you think he moved into Lori's?
It was Lori's. Yes, we did get told after by a friend of his. It was Lori's place he'd moved into.
Never mind that in November when the police showed up and talked to Chad, he said he didn't know Lori.
Didn't know her. Yeah, that's
he
who he
barely
moved
knew
into.
her.
So he tells us, I'm moving out. I can't be in the house. And then just days after that, he's left for Hawaii. I had a conversation with Matt's mom after he left for Hawaii. And it was a good conversation. And she said, he should be home comforting his children. Why is he in Hawaii? And Chad had told this story to his parents that there was a guy out there, and he actually used the name of the guy that did their wedding, whoever that guy was. He used that guy's name, telling us he was the one that had called Chad and said, I want you to write my family history. Can you come do that? And that was his story, is why he went to Hawaii.
That's sort of his go-to lie, because that
Exactly.
letter written to Charles Vallow was about, hey, Lori, can you...
I'm a baseball player. Can you come write my book for
come
me?
write my book.
Mm-hmm. That was the same thing.
Whether Lori wrote it or Chad, I don't know if we know, but maybe you know, but it was clearly, I think that was created by Chad.
Yeah, my understanding that Lori wrote that and sent that to Chad. So he's in Hawaii, and that's the last conversation I had with Matt's mom about it. Was she said he should be home with his kids. And I thought, yeah, he should. So not even a week later, I get this phone call from the Relief Society president that he's married, and he had gone at least 3 or 4 different people's houses to introduce Lori that I know of. This Relief Society president was one, and she said, Heather, she's beautiful. I don't get what's going on here. Kind of indicating how.
Right. How did this work out?
And so anyway, that happens. And in that conversation, that woman told me, Heather, an investigation's been started. That there are people at the elementary school that Tammy worked at. They are concerned. So they've called police. And I said, oh my God, thank God. Someone's called the police, because I said I wanted to, but I didn't have anything to tell them other than I have a bad feeling about this. So anyway, Matt calls his mom. It does not go well. Matt's devastated. More in how his mom responded. It was just like, why did that turn like that? So Matt comes home, and before Matt came home, I said to Matt, I'm going to text those kids. I'm going to text Chad's kids. Because in the conversation I had with that Relief Society president, I understood that the kids knew that there was an investigation that had been started, that they were devastated by their dad getting remarried, and that this was looking not good, is how I understood what was going on. So I did a group text to the 4 kids, because Mark was on his mission. He wasn't home. In South Africa, he did not come home for the funeral. He chose not to. And he didn't even have time to get home. Yeah. So I text them, just, I've just been told that your dad's remarried. You have every right to be upset about that. And then an investigation's been opened. I am here. If I can do anything for you, I'm here. It was trying to let them know they had some family there that could help. Support. Immediately, all 5 or 4 of those kids. Garth's was, what the hell? It was lashing back at me. I am confused as confused. What is going on? These guys are okay. They are not upset. They are not upset. They have to be upset. What's going on? Not 5 minutes later, my phone rings and it's Chad. So I answer, and he's like, hey, Heather, how are you? And I said, I'm not good. He said, yeah, you've been a problem for me my whole life. And I said, I've been a problem for you your whole life? What? Doesn't even make sense. What are you talking about? And he said, you just stir the pot. You're just creating problems. That's something I'd been told by Matt's dad. I stir the pot because I'm asking questions about Julie Rowe and what he's been doing. I finally got told, you're stirring the pot. Leave it alone. So I said, Chad, who's this person you've married? So her name's Lori, Lori. Crap, how her name is spelled.
He really did spell it?
He did. He spelled out her name. And he said, she's amazing. Do you want to meet her? And I said, I do not want to meet her. Don't come to my house. And I said, what happened to Tammy? Chad, what happened? And, well, she had pulmonary embolism.
He told
Are
you that?
you the biggest massive idiot on the planet? You not 3 weeks ago told me a completely different story. Now it's a pulmonary embolism because she's gained 40 pounds.
He says
It's
she
like,
gained 40 pounds.
Do you even know how the body works? Then you should have died of a pulmonary embolism years ago, Chad, fat ass. So that's what his explanation was. She died of a pulmonary embolism. And so I didn't even know what to say to him. I said, Chad, I understand there. And he said, why are you telling my kids there's an investigation? I said, because there is, and there should be. And he said, well, he said I should have written it down. I didn't, but he ultimately said, well, I'm moving to Hawaii with Lori. You can forget about me. You don't have to think about me again. And this is the one thing I've been wrong in. I was wrong in this. I said to him, that will be easily done. I was wrong. So hung up with him.
As if, by the way, just running away to Hawaii is going to solve all his problems,
Yeah.
right? Like they have such a simplistic view. Like if you just avoid it, if you just avoid these unpleasant facts or, the reality of the situation, then somehow it'll just disappear.
That's true. It's almost like he really believed that.
Really, he did.
really
He's like,
believed
you
it.
don't have to worry about me anymore. I'll be in
Right.
Hawaii. I'm like, still dead wife,
Right.
investigation.
Right. Exactly.
You didn't know that there were dead children.
Had no clue of children yet. No clue.
And also that you see that when Lori's arrested and they have some of those initial hearings for Lori and Chad's not arrested, he's still free and he's sitting behind her. Like he really thinks at some level, or he acts as if he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Like and then when he's arrested, he doesn't understand why he's
He doesn't
in jail.
understand. And we've been told from people, various people, that he really is sitting in jail flabbergasted as to why he's there.
Right, we've been told that too.
Yeah, he doesn't understand it.
I think part of that is that even though he was involved in this, even though he was a conspirator, because he probably didn't get his hands dirty. I mean, he might have. Like, I'm not convinced that he didn't with Tylee. Certainly after she was dead, we know he had some involvement in burying her for sure. But I think he literally thinks let's say Alex Cox killed all the folks, all these people, because he didn't kill them. I think in his mind's eye, he didn't do it. Like, how can you get me on murder when Alex did it? I mean, even though I told him to.
I do believe that. I think, and I really don't, that's what I'm saying. I don't think he's a super intelligent person, because I really do believe that if he didn't do the actual killing, you couldn't find fault. He didn't do it.
You know, I've seen so many videos of Chad. Not only have I seen them and listened, I've been editing them. Like, I have gotten more of Chad and his characteristics than I've ever wanted to get. You know, I've spent listening to him for hours. There is something very simplistic and kind of confusing for me about Chad still.
I think if you were to meet Paul, Brad, Chad's different.
He is different.
He is different. He isn't, Paul's very outgoing and very easy to talk to. And Chad's, I've always said, even, the issues that, I'm just remembering something. When I was at the funeral, afterwards, I'm in Relief Society mode. I'm cleaning up, I'm vacuuming, all that stuff. We're all standing in the hall, and Becky and Brad, the two youngest siblings who have had some issues, were talking to Chad, and Brad was just saying something to the effect of, yeah, we've had our problems and blah, 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 but we love you, want to support you. Chad hugs those two, and I hear him say, "No judgment here." I thought that was weird, because that's all Chad did was judge them.
A lot of people.
I judged them. I mean, I was very judgmental of Matt's younger siblings. I have a bigger understanding now, and I feel completely different. But that stood out to me when he said, "No judgment here." And I thought, what?
Well, and also, you might have to take this out, but from our conversation in the fall of 2020, when we first talked, there was a discussion about how family would get together for various reunions or hunting trips or whatever, and Chad frequently would never ask questions about how other people were doing.
Oh, never.
He never had no empathy, right? And then there was specifically a story that Matt told. I don't know if we can use this, but we haven't used it. But
We haven't used it, we'll ask.
But they were in the hot tub, and they hadn't seen each other for a few years, and all the brothers were in the hot tub, and this was getting close to when all this was starting to happen. And the brothers are all catching up and talking about how they're doing, and Chad had no interest whatsoever in how they were doing or what they were doing, and he was just in his own world. And I think that I love that story, because to me that describes Chad Daybell. He's in his own, he lives in a fantasy world he's created, and he doesn't care about even his own brothers.
That's absolutely true. I think Matt would be totally fine with you sharing that, because that is something he and I have commented on many times, is that when we would see him, it was all about his books. That's all he talked about. Here, Matt's got a business. Matt, never. Hey, how are things going for you? How's your business? Never. It's like he didn't even know should be a thing. So that was.
There's some insecurity, in his autobiography, he talks about how
I do want to talk about
all the other siblings have master's degrees and he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, and then he prayed on it. Remember that? And
Mm-hmm.
he.
That was a dig
Okay.
in that book. That was a dig at Matt. I absolutely believe that.
Specifically at Matt.
Yes, because. So I did ask Matt, "Are you okay if I share this story?" On our property, we planted he wanted a little apple orchard. So one day as Matt's planting those trees, Chad came over, which was rare. Chad never came to our house.
Okay, that's interesting. He lives right by you guys.
He lives right by us. Our property is supposedly supposed to be this important thing in his whole scheme of things, but never came over. I think we had him over for a family home evening. We invited them over. but he never just showed up at the house. But he came and he had his autobiography. It was not printed yet. It was just like in a binder. He wanted Matt to read it. Matt's planting these apple trees. And he said, Chad, I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to be honest with you. He's like, so when would this have been? Right before that autobiography came out. I don't know what
I think
that
it was 2018.
2018.
Well, 17, 18. It was definitely after he moved to Rexburg.
Yeah.
I believe the first printing would have been, it was either 17 or 18. It might have been 18.
Yeah, that sounds right. Because it was almost like he wrote that he wanted Matt to know his story, and Matt wasn't interested. And he said to Chad, because at this point, I mean, the earthquake never happened. None of this stuff happened. And Matt was like, this is nonsense. So Matt, as he's planting these trees, he said to Chad, I'm planting these apple trees, fully intending to eat apples off of them years and years from now. And Chad said, so am I. You don't even know which side of your mouth you're talking out of anymore. He would just say what people wanted to hear. He knew Matt didn't want to read the book, but I'm standing there and I said, Chad, I'll read your book. He's like, oh, I was not the intended audience, but I said, give it to me and I'll read it. It took me all of 4 hours to get through that thing. It was unpleasant. But what stood out to me was what you just said. You know, I had this crossroads, and I'd even gone and I was getting my master's, but decided, he says in the book, if he goes the master's route, then he knew he'd end up with a great big home. He'd have a lot of money. It was like he was describing Matt's life. And he said, or I could write these books. And that's the direction he took.
And be more spiritual.
Right. And be more spiritual. I have had multiple people tell me that he was very jealous of Matt.
And apparently, or maybe some of the other siblings as well.
Yeah, because they all, Brad's an occupational therapist, not Brad. Paul is an occupational therapist like Matt. They're in the same profession. Brad went to law school, became an attorney. So I think that really, really bothered Chad.
Yeah.
But the way he described, because Matt and I have built, with a lot of hard work, have built this home that is our dream home. We flipped houses. We have a beautiful home. And Chad, in a couple instances, made a point of that's the worldly way of doing things that he's kept. And he specifically said this, we've always liked the smaller, older home. I don't care what you live in. Just don't judge me because of what I live in. He just was very judgmental of everyone.
Although I have to point this out, but John and I have brought up how Chad mentioned to somebody that his new wife was hot and loaded.
That was said to us as well. Like the person he said that to called us and said, this is what Chad has said to me.
Clearly he liked money, in other words.
That she's hot and she's loaded. Yeah.
Right, which again is a contradiction from the so-called spiritual path that he was taking.
Yeah, correct. So anyway, that's the apple orchard story where Matt was like, I'm going to eat these apples once they're all trees are growing. But Chad agreed. Yeah, I will too. That's not what you're saying in the stupid book you're trying to get him to read.
Right,
So
it's not what he's telling
it's
everyone.
not right. So I took the book and I read it. And then I took it to Chad's house and said, Matt will never read this. Doesn't want to. I read it. There you go. I think it was kind of his last stitch effort in trying to get us to see his bigger purpose. And we didn't agree.
And to get some kudos.
Mm-hmm.
I think he wanted validation and attention, I'm sure.
Yeah. So anyway, that's that. But so Tammy's died, go to the funeral, the memorial, awful conversation with Matt's mom that Matt has. So Lori, so we get a call from law enforcement saying,
When is this?
so we took our boys on a vacation to New York City to go see our son's mission. That was Christmas time, 2019. We get a call right before our trip. So this is a few weeks before. So that was November. We get this call from law enforcement. Just so you know, here's what we can tell you. There are missing children. And I like, wait, because Matt and I, when Chad said to me, his wife's name was Lori. How did I get this in? Because I knew to look up Lori Vallow. I don't remember if he said Vallow or if someone else did. It may have been that relief study. I don't remember, but I Googled Lori Vallow. And I didn't know at the time Matt was doing the same thing. I called Matt and I said, Matt, there's a Lori Vallow from Arizona whose husband was just shot and killed by her brother. This cannot be the same person. And Matt said, I just saw that too. I'm kind of freaking out. So we're like, okay, what is happening? We get a call from law enforcement saying, just so you're aware, because you're in this family and this is such close proximity to you, this is hitting the news and it's going to hit nationally. There are 2 missing children. She has 2 children. We get told Tylee and JJ, their ages, and we're asked, do you know anything about them? We don't even know who this woman is. We don't know anything. So they just were giving us the heads up, just so you know, this is going to be big. It's bad. And it's a lot more involved than just what you know right now. We've been told that over and over. Here's what you know. Here's what's happening. So we go on our trip. We're sitting in the hotel lobby, ABC News. There's a picture of Lori, and I'm in New York City. And I said, Matt, this is bad. This is bad. They weren't lying. It's going to be bad. We get back home, and then it's all, where are the kids? Where are the kids? Matt gets a call, and I don't know what month this was. It's before Lori's arrested. Our office manager called Matt and said, hey, I just got a call from a Larry Woodcock. He would really like to talk to you. I think you want to take this call. So Matt did. He called Larry, and Larry, just such a nice man, and just said, thank you for talking to me. They are at wit's end. No one's helping. Like, nobody's saying anything. Nobody's helping that knows anything. And he just said, what do you know? And Matt's like, I don't know anything other than my sister-in-law just died. And now he's remarried to this woman that we don't know what's going on. We actually met with Larry and Kay at their hotel and had a talk with them. And they told us a little bit about Lori. And so that was super informative. They gave us some information as far as this is when we get introduced to the light and dark and the rating of people. And they show us some of these documents of President Nelson used to be this person in a past life. And my mind was so blown because it was so much deeper and bigger than what I thought, than what Matt thought. And that he had rated, what stood out the most to me is that he had rated Tylee like 4 point something D. And I could see that was bad. That meant she was dark. I scanned quickly for my own name. I didn't see it. I did see where he's saying who Joe Murray, Emma's husband, used to be. And there was a few, and he'd rated these people and church leaders that here's who they used to be. And that's when I first see James and Elena. Very good reading of their love story, by the way. It was disgusting.
That love story is so important to this case, by the way.
It's
So
so
you heard me read it to John.
I couldn't listen to the whole thing. It honestly makes me physically
It
ill.
triggers you, and
It
this is
physically
your,
makes
this
me
is your
sick.
family. These are your
Yeah.
loved ones.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Whereas
anyway,
we have a little distance, so we can be a little more
Yeah.
playful with it.
The
We don't wanna
loin
be
fire thing,
disrespectful.
though, we do have to just laugh. The loin fire.
It's a scientific phenomenon, Heather. You know that. I know that.
It's
Lauren knows that. Everyone knows that.
so weird. Then we've got Dateline, and we've got reporters on our front porch, and I had to get security in my house. And in the meantime, at church, I know COVID was devastating. It was a blessing for our family because we get home from New York, it's just weeks that everything's shut down. So we didn't have to see people. We were, in our home, didn't have to see anyone. But what I'm hearing through the grapevine and different people is that our ward members are very split. And I'm involved somehow. There's Chad supporters and there's Heather supporters, and there weren't many Heather supporters. And I'm like, I haven't done anything. What did I do?
I saw early on, I jumped on some Facebook groups. It was the pandemic. I had a new child. had just quit reporting, and I still have screenshots of your neighbors. There were Chad's neighbors saying, I believe Chad. I believe Chad. And just firmly, I've talked to Chad. I believe him. So I know what you're talking about.
So what Chad was doing, once they had Lori, and they come back to Idaho, and Chad's just living at the house. We were fearful. And Matt did ask law enforcement, do I need to get Heather out of here? And they said, we're listening to everything. If we get concerned, we'll let you know. So when Alex Cox ends up dead, that's when we could kind of breathe a little easier, because it was early on very apparent to us that that's who we needed to be afraid of actually doing anything.
That's who was doing the killings.
And so Tammy gets exhumed, Alex Cox dies. I'm thinking I should be writing my own freaking book. I can't even dream this up. I'm hearing that there are ward members upset at me because Chad was telling his kids, was telling anyone who would listen, that I was accusing him of killing Tammy, that I had started the investigation, that I had called the police, which none of that was true. There was already an investigation going on because of Charles' death and following kids missing, Tammy, Kay calling police, all that stuff. That was already in process before I even knew anything was going on.
There was a Reddit post by who we believe is Emma. I'm sure you've seen it, that she says her mom's body was exhumed. I mean, she's writing anonymously, but it's easy to figure out who it is, and that it was started by her aunt. So is that you?
I talked to Samantha, Tammy's sister, and she said, Chad called us trying to convince us that you were doing this. So, and Samantha said, I knew immediately that you weren't, that you had not done this.
Again, it's such an oversimplification. When these two are, when people are dropping dead left and right around Chad and Lori, at some point, law enforcement is going to start asking questions, right? So to blame it all on you or try to pin it on you.
And I want to clarify this because I've seen online and stuff where people this is fishy. So my daughter, her father-in-law is Dave Hope. He was one of the detectives. We had no clue that he was in part of this. We assumed he probably knew about it because there's only so many detectives in Rexburg, that he was investigating. He was investigating where the missing kids. He was not investigating Tammy's death. So when he shows up to the junior high where Garth works and says, I want to ask you some questions about these kids. Do you know anything? Well, Garth even texted me and said, would you get the police to leave us alone?
Because it's your daughter's. It's your daughter's
because he
father-in-law.
knows Maggie's last name is Hope, and he knew that they met at Maggie's wedding, so he knows that's who that is.
It's connected to you.
But until we were told there were missing kids and this was all going to come out, he never said anything to us. He can't do that. We didn't get any information from him. So that's where I think Chad took that from, Dave coming to talk to Garth. And he just said, yep, Heather called the police. It was Dave that showed up. And just not true.
As if it matters who called the police.
It doesn't matter. And that's the thing. Okay, there's an investigation. There's some bad stuff here.
Right.
If I had information, you bet I would have called the law enforcement.
I guess the implication is because you're dark, you have no credibility.
And I'm just creating this problem for it because I've always been a problem
exactly.
for him.
You're a troublemaker, Heather. Stop
I'm a pot stirrer.
She's a pot stirrer. You're the one that asks questions.
Yeah.
You ask questions. You were curious.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is very much like Tylee. I think one of the reasons Tylee was...
Yeah. She knew way too much, I believe. Yeah.
She knew too much, but she also questioned the whole system and the whole belief system. And I think Tylee was much too independent and much too independently minded.
And she's very different from the little what I've seen of her in video and things. She's very different than Chad's own children, where they're not a talk backer kind of kids. And they're just very quiet and
compliant. They listen. They're compliant. Yeah. If he thinks Garth was a handful, I can't imagine a regular teenager like Tylee.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to say that here because, and I want to make it clear, I don't have a relationship with those children right now, because initially they did believe their dad, that I created this problem for them. I don't communicate they don't want to communicate with us. The only time since all of this, our bishop called Matt and said, hey, Mark is giving a talk about his mission once Mark got home. So Matt said, let's go and just support Mark. I did not want to be there, but I went. And Garth, after that meeting, we went up to say hello to them. Garth gave me a big hug. And I said, Garth, I want you to know that I love you and I have always loved you. And I am so sorry. And he was very kind. And he said, we love you too. Seth wouldn't even look at me. Mark wouldn't talk to me. Emma, Garth was the only one. So when I hear Suzanne Freeman in her interview talk about how Chad had said to her, I was so glad when Garth got on his mission because he was our hardest kid. And I thought, oh my God. He was your hard kid. Garth's a great kid. And I have heard nothing but good things about Garth from the kids that have him as a teacher at the junior high. He is loved there. I am fearful for him in what he will choose to say under oath for his dad. I hope he doesn't put himself at risk. And we have been told that's a concern, that he would lie for his dad. I hope that doesn't happen, but they're good kids.
I think
they're good kids.
The facts are so compelling, though, that it would be, if he does lie, I think it would be obvious, unfortunately.
I do too.
I hope he doesn't.
I hope he doesn't. And I will say, I earlier mentioned, I believe that Garth was coerced into coming to Rexburg because, and I have that from different family sources, that he was at UVU in Orem in Utah, living in an apartment, and he was doing well. He was happy there. His dad, again, this is through family members, that his dad told him that he had dark spirits or demons attached to him that he couldn't get rid of unless he moved to Rexburg. That's how he got him to move, and that Garth was very upset about that. Went and tried to get got a blessing from his grandpa Douglas and to help him be okay. And that kid moved to Rexburg, and it messed up. He had to go to school even longer because he went to BYU, Idaho, and it messed up, credits. And so I'm glad, I'm grateful that Garth is doing well, teaching what he wants to teach at the junior high.
And he's married. He met his
He's
wife
married.
in Rexburg.
Met his wife in Rexburg. Emma met her husband in Rexburg. I think Rexburg has been good for them, despite their dad. So however they feel about me at this point, I think Emma kind of runs the show with those kids, and Emma doesn't like me. I have had no idea how they felt about, other than they were supporting their dad. That 2020 interview they did when they're trying to say their dad's been framed. I believe that's probably the defense. That's kind of all you got to, for Chad's defense, that he was framed by this seductress of a woman, and
Who would do anything for him. So she still believes, she seems to still completely believe in his worldview, and yet she framed him somehow, I guess.
Well, what do you think about that, though? I mean, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but who do you think is the leader in this? Did Lori seduce him? Was this Chad?
so my opinion is that Chad offered her spiritually what she was looking for, and Lori provided him sexually, physically, what he was looking for, because he was looking. So I think, and Larry and Kay and Matt and I, as we've talked, we all agree it was just the perfect storm. It was just because, and that's all I can come up with, because Chad is nothing. Ew, like he's. I'm being rude, but ew. I mean, he's nothing attractive. So until she got her hands on him, slimmed him down, grew his hair out, all the names that he's been called, I'm like, yep. So I think that's all it could be, is that he built her up. You're a goddess. You're all these things. He just played into what she was looking for, and she was hot and loaded. And I do think that's really his inner desires, despite his, I'm going to keep myself poor because that'll keep me spiritually aligned. So all that happens. In the meantime, when kids are still missing, I met with our bishop and just said, I just want to let you know this is going to get really bad. And the little that I know, this is going to get really bad. And his response to me was, well, I'm trying to stay positive. I felt completely, again, dismissed.
Wow. You've told me that story before, and it always shocks me.
And I said to him, I told your wife all of this stuff, and I know she told you. And he said, she did. He said, I just figured you didn't like him. And I said to him, why was he so believable? And I wasn't. I'm not a liar.
It's a great question.
In your Relief Society presidency, I'm a good person. I'm known for being a good person. So why would I do that? Why would I lie? Why would I make stuff up about this person? If he was as upstanding as you thought, I would have nothing to say, because I don't trash on people just for fun. I couldn't believe that was the response I got at that point. These kids are missing. So
What did he say to that?
Yeah.
we're trying to stay positive. That this isn't real, that this is Chad's innocent.
I mean, at that point, there were a lot of facts that were starting to accumulate.
So I had that conversation. I was very, very disappointed in that conversation.
That it shocks me every time I hear it.
I did have a conversation with our stake president, who again, these are good men. They got lied to. These are good men. Not very perceptive, I think, but they are good people. I did meet with our stake president and talked about this, and he shared some things with me, and he was told to meet with Chad and Tammy when Julie Rowe was being excommunicated. So I think that's why, because I was in the stake, I think Chad thought that the stake president and I were talking more about this than we were. So he just indicated, we knew Julie Rowe was being excommunicated. I was asking Chad, are you involved in this? And he said, Chad flat out lied to me. But he said, now I can see that. He said, I didn't get, any warm fuzzies around Chad, but I didn't get bad feelings. And so, in a conversation I'd had with the stake president, I did say, where was your discernment? 2 stake presidents now, 2 bishops now.
And you're the Stake Relief Society president. Let me remind people that you have a calling in the church that makes you a leader, a much bigger leader than Chad.
So that is one thing I did say to him is you're supposed to all have this added measure of discernment when you're in these callings. That's what I was taught. And I don't see that. I had more discernment than all of you, and I don't have the priesthood. So I have talked with the stake president about that. And then
What did they say?
nothing. What can they say?
They just
Can't argue that.
look the truth in the face.
So Lori gets arrested, pans out, Chad. So the day, I only saw Chad once between when Lori was arrested and when he was arrested, and he was out in his yard. He looked awful. We hit June 2020. We're working on our landscaping. He's rented a pipe puller. We're trying to get landscaping sprinkling system in. We're outside working. One of my sons was on his way to work that morning. He called me and he said, Mom, there are a lot of cars at Chad's house. Police cars, black cars. There's a lot of people there. And I said, crap. And even previous to that, I said to Matt, when Chad's trying to put a mobile home on his property at one point, that's when I said, Matt, I don't think these kids, at this point, they've got the last photo of Tylee in Yellowstone and all of that stuff. And people were speculating they could be buried. Oh my gosh, they could have been anywhere. And I said to Matt, they're at his house. And Matt said, Chad's not that stupid. And I said, I think he is. It makes sense because then he can watch. He can, keep guard. They're right there under his nose. And when he wanted to put the mobile home down, that's when I said, that's where they are. And he wanted all his kids to live there. So when my son called and said, all these cars are there, I said to Matt, they're going to find them. And then Kay called, or she texted, and she said, just letting you know, there's a search warrant. They're at the house. They have cadaver dog. I can genuinely say I've had some shitty things happen in my life. It's the worst day of my life. My son, my youngest son, so we're all just at the house, it was awful. We can see the helicopter in the sky. Nadine's up in the sky. And my youngest son has a friend who was working construction, and someone that he was working with, his wife was a dispatch person, and that person had called her husband and said they found JJ.
Oh.
So that person tells this kid, and this kid calls my son, and
Welcome to Rexburg.
exactly, and said they found JJ, and I lost it. And Matt said, Heather, that's not confirmed. We don't know that. We don't know that. Let's wait till we hear from someone who matters in this. And shortly after, Kay texted and said they found him. She had received some misinformation as far as where he was. That was clarified. And then we were told they'd found Tylee and what condition that girl was in. My heart has never felt the way. No, I can't even describe that. To know that one of your family members could be involved in something like that. So, communicated the best I could with Kay. So sorry. I don't even know what to say. Matt's devastated. I called my son that was at Provo. He immediately drove up. We met. Matt's brother Paul drove up. We met with Larry and Kay. What do you even say? What do you even say? I'm so sorry. I could hardly tolerate driving home. I have to pass that house to get to my own home. I am just now, 3 years later, 2.5 years later, 3 since Tammy died, am I able to stomach living there? And to know that people are angry at me? So Matt talked to his parents when those kids were found. I believe they even drove up to be with Chad's kids. And the kids were saying they're pioneer bones, they're animal bones, they're pioneer bones. It's not them. How do you wrap your brain around that?
Such mental gymnastics.
I don't fault them. That how do you wrap your brain around that? They just found 2 kids in your dad's backyard. For Matt's parents, how do you process that? So it wasn't until those 2 kids were found that people in the area finally were like, oh, wow, we were wrong. We were lied to. We thought he was something different. And at that point, I was so angry at every dumbass who believed him that I was a hermit in my home. I couldn't see anybody. I had a friend that one of those friends in that relief study presidency to contact me and said, I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you. She was a friend. Didn't believe you. I'm sorry. About a week after those kids were found, Matt's mom did call me. And she said, Heather, put it on speaker. I want Matt to listen and I want Jack to listen, but I don't want him to speak. Just let me talk. And she apologized for having said the things she had said to Matt about me. It was sincere. It was genuine. And I said, I'm so sorry. I don't even know. I can't imagine how you feel. As far as you and I, we need to be okay and support each other. I was so grateful she made that phone call. That was not an easy phone call for her to make. Jack sat there and listened. He didn't say anything. And not yet to this day has he ever apologized. And I don't expect that he ever will. That's fine. So I'll briefly kind of touch on, so where I'm at as far as like in Matt's family, Paul did say to his parents, Heather was right. She was right. And Matt and I, just as we've talked and have tried to heal from the things that were said about me, all we can come up with is that they were just in such a confused, hurt state that they just needed to deflect that onto somebody else. And it was me. I understand that. So today, I don't hold any resentment toward Matt's parents. I am deeply concerned for them, but I have to keep a clear line because they do communicate with Chad regularly, as they should. They're his parents. But because they communicate, and I need to not have communication because I don't want anything misconstrued, said, anything that could get confused. So Matt, it's done a number on his relationship with them as well. He loves his parents. They do a family group chat that they talk to each other again about. Nothing about Chad is ever discussed. You wouldn't know it was even going on if you read their texts. It's about the garden growing and fishing and going, it's that kind of thing. What they need to do to maintain as much normalcy as they can as a family. So my kids have said, you have a relationship with your grandparents, the kind that you want. Just because I'm not communicating with them doesn't mean that you can't. You're big kids. You do what you feels best for you. So like my son and his wife that live down in Provo, they get together with Paul and with grandparents and have dinner, and I'm happy for that. So I just have to, one thing I'm learning is how to create boundaries. And that's one that I have right now.
You talked about the devastation, and I think obviously you've conveyed why you've experienced that sense of devastation. But I have the sense that maybe it goes even deeper than you being a scapegoat and not being believed. And, obviously it's created some rifts in the family, but could you just talk a little bit about the total impact? And I know you've talked about a lot of it, but
what it's done, and Matt and I, and a few of my children, we've had some really good therapy. Can't say enough about just talk therapy and talking through things. But one thing that living in a smaller, tight-knit community and having this happen, again, Matt and I have worked really hard to create a good name for ourselves. And that was really difficult. It's still to this day very difficult to go anywhere in town and hand them a debit card and it says Heather Daybell. You always get the look. When people ask your name, what's your name? Heather who? Heather Daybell. Oh, it's just a lot of that. And that is even one thing that Matt's mom said to me when she called and apologized was that, and that was one thing that was very hard for us, is that we're right in the thick of it. This is my home. He's a half a mile from my home. This was in my ward. And she did say, we don't live there. Yes, they're the parents and but they could separate a little bit because they're not in Rexburg. I mean, I got introduced to someone just last week. Oh, where are you from? Rexburg, Idaho. Oh, do you know about that Daybell case? Yes, I do. So
Maybe.
a little. So and I've said to Matt, would you be offended if I went by my maiden name, Smith? Because I blend with a lot of people. And so just trying to recover. And it makes me really sad for Matt. And I realized in the beginning when all this was happening, I was saying things to him that really hurt him because that's his name. It's his family. And so I had to kind of tone that down because it was hurting him. But now we're to a point he can joke about it. Like we have to kind of joke about it. But just being associated with this story, it devastates us. Because I was the kind of parent that to my own children, I would say, I'd rather you be the bullied than be a bully. You just don't hurt people. It's one of my biggest issues that I'll get into about the church. You just don't hurt people. We unintentionally do that all the time. We're human. But you don't knowingly hurt people. And this more than hurt innocent people. So being associated with that, having tried again, I did not think it would go where it went. I didn't think people dying would happen. But I can't explain this. I don't know. But when Matt would say things like, Heather, let it go. The chat's here. Just let it go. There's nothing. I couldn't. It was eating me alive. And I hated that. I didn't like that. I wanted to let it go, but I couldn't. And I'd say to Matt, it was like anything that happened, it's like I called it before it happened. It's like, why? It's like I had these spidey senses when it came to Chad. And I don't know why that is. But he did something that altered our lives. They have no control over. Couldn't do anything about it. I tried the best that I could to say something to people I thought could maybe do something about it. And I even would say to Chad, you're really getting off track. And he'd say, the church knows what I'm doing. They haven't told me to stop. So I'm good. He said that to me several times. Church knows what I'm doing.
Do you think that's accurate?
I think knowing now what I know about church headquarters and how they keep tabs on people, I think they were aware. I don't think they wanted to touch this, that a member of their church, because Chad was not excommunicated before the bodies were found. I think they haven't wanted to say anything publicly about this. They didn't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole because it's a reflection. So I love Under the Banner of Heaven. Can't say I love. That's a weird way to say that. I'm grateful that light is being shown on this stuff. That the Netflix documentary has come out and they did a fantastic job of the timeline of things. That it was very clear. So that I'm grateful for, that it's shining a light on some of this stuff. Now, does the LDS Church produce a bunch of killers? No, there's some that have really taken things to extreme. But do these people that have done these things justify their actions because of church teachings? Absolutely. And I've learned a lot since all this happened. So for me, it's just that it's a daily reminder, because I have to drive by that place every day. So when it all happened, I was telling you, I had a house picked out down in southern Utah. I was out of there. I was leaving. If Matt was coming or not, I was leaving. That house sold really fast. I went down and looked at it. Went down with my mom. It sold before I could do anything about it. It went from that to, okay, maybe I can stay. Maybe I don't need to leave the state. Maybe I can stay in the area, but I just can't stay right here. But that was devastating because we worked so hard on that place and we love it. We love that place. We built our home. We worked hard. And Matt would keep saying, you know what? I feel like if we leave, it's like we let Chad win. It's like we let Chad get the best of us. And that didn't feel right either. And so, but we put an offer on some property south. I said, even if you can get me south of here, just get me, because our business is there. Our kid was graduating high school there. We don't want to uproot him. And put an offer down, and the woman just wouldn't respond. It took 2 months. She wasn't responding. And I finally just said, you know what, look, we'll stay. I'm in a better place. I will go into my church stuff, but I think I can stay here. Let's just kind of remodel. We'll brighten things up. We'll just make it feel new. So that's what we've been doing. We're in the end processes of that, where I'm feeling more comfortable in my home again and in the neighborhood. I don't talk to anybody unless I see them, say hi. I don't really talk to anybody. Not that I don't like them. It's just
So you were a lot more social before.
Yeah, I'm not one that has like a huge group of friends that I go hang out with. Matt's my friend, and when I go do anything outside my home, it's with usually Matt, my family. But I go have lunch once in a while with people, and I don't do a lot of that. But that's why this last winter I went to esthetician school. That was mostly just to meet new people in a different context. And those girls were exactly what I needed. I was by far the oldest, just like the old mom of all of them. But I think there were 13 of us, and all but 2 had left the church. They were the crowd I needed, and awesome girls. So that was super helpful. And then working on our home, getting my little room ready, to have my business at home, to do esthetician work and massage therapy and stuff like that. So that was all good. I think the question that I had, again, is still not resolved in my mind, but initially when we first talked to you guys was, is Chad inherently an evil person? Is there something that could have been done that would have prevented him getting to this extreme? Or was this just going to happen? And I don't know how anyone can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, it's always such a hard question. I know Matt was struggling with that a lot. I think in some ways it's easier just to label someone as evil and be done with it, right? Because then you don't have to explain it. He was born evil. He's evil. It was going to happen. But I think, and also that would take the onus off of upbringing or family, right? It would kind of make things easier, I think, for family members to see it that way. So I get that, but we know this was a good family.
It's a good family. And my view has changed a little bit, where I initially was like, this guy's evil to the core. Learning some of the things I've learned that I know Chad learned about church history and different things. My opinion has changed a little bit in that I think he discovered things the way I discovered things, and he took it in a different direction than I did.
You shared that with me once. Yeah. That it made you maybe a little bit more doubtful of the faith. Well, for him,
he had to fix it.
He had to fix it.
Church had gone off track. It was in apostasy. And he needed to be the person to be in charge because the church leaders now they were going to be turning to him. I think that's the direction he took it, where I took it as it's just not true from the very beginning. So I just stepped in a different direction. So I don't know.
I think that definitely, and we talk about this in the podcast, but those issues around mortality and those fears around mortality, I think they led him in such an extreme direction. You know, for normal people, it's not easy, but we cope with it and we come to terms with it. And
The fact that we all die. Yeah.
right. But I think for Chad, that was a really difficult pill to swallow. And I think while he dealt with it his own way when he was younger, I think that it caught up with him. And that combination with Julie Rowe and her notoriety, and I think I don't think Chad was good with processing his emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, dealing with mortality is a very difficult, it brings up a lot of difficult emotions that are hard to deal with. And if you can't, you're going to go in an unhealthy direction potentially, or you're going to turn to drugs or whatever. There's a lot of ways you could go, but Chad was never a very open-minded guy. You know, Matt is quite different in that regard. You know, like I think there were a lot of things that came together. If Lori and Chad were a perfect storm, then I think Chad and certain variables or certain things that were happening in his life were kind of a perfect storm too. So the grave digging stuff, the religious beliefs,
The lack of being open-minded.
the lack of being open-minded, the struggles with his emotions, the relationship with his mother that wasn't very close. I think that, we talked about attachment. And I'm not taking anything away from Sheila or belittling her in any way, but for whatever reasons, Chad just wasn't close to her. And I don't think he really felt completely attached to her. And I think that probably played a role too. So I think this combination of things, so which, could there have been some genetic variables, like being open-minded is genetic to some degree, not fully, but to some degree. The lack of empathy could be partially genetic, So, I mean, all of these things, all of these variables, I think, came together, and they were especially combustible when he met Lori. So I think you bring Lori into the mix, and then you've got all these other variables in play, and
that's one thing I have had to. I used to say if I had done more, if Matt had done more, if Matt's parents had done more, saying something, calling him out, doing something, if the church leaders would have said, "Hey, if they'd have listened to anyone, would Tammy still be here? Would those kids still be here?" And I did through therapy and stuff just finally come to the conclusion that I just don't have that much power. Nobody does. And one thing I have come to the conclusion, I did everything I could do. And it's none of this is on me, is on Matt, is on Matt's parents. This is on Chad and on Lori. And there are answers we will never have. The inner workings of their brains, I don't understand it. But
in fact, I would argue that you did more than almost anyone, and look what happened. Look where it got you. Look at the response to your pushing back, to your being a bit of an adversary and questioning things. Right? So
that's just one thing. That's something that I'm at peace now, is that there's just some things I won't ever have answers to, and I have to be okay with that. And to try to go down those paths, well, okay, if that person had done that, or that's just zaps energy and it doesn't get me anywhere. So just letting that stuff go.
Right. At this point, I think it's about grieving.
It is.
More than trying to change a past that's not going to change.
Yeah. So Matt and I are just trying to gear up for the trial. I don't think we will be if we make any trips to Boise, it will maybe be one. And I told Larry and Kay, that would be to sit next to you and show our support of you. I don't know at this point if to sit and listen to that trial day in, day out for 10 weeks or however long that's going to take is going to be a healthy thing. So we'll just kind of get the highlights and let law enforcement and the judicial system do their thing, hopefully appropriately. And just let that happen and move on.
That looming trial would be hard. That would, just to know that's coming too, and the emotions that will bring. We were discussing this interview with Julie Rowe, how she called Emma up, or Emma called her, or Julie called Emma, I'm not sure what, right after Tammy was found deceased and I'm going to say murdered. And she brought up past probations and a fear of polygamy. Can you tell me, you've thought a lot about that and Emma and bringing up polygamy with Julie Rowe the day her mom died and her fear of her dad getting remarried. Mm-hmm. What do you think happened? What do you think that was about?
And I'm speculating, I don't know. But I have wondered if Chad did approach Tammy about polygamy as one of his, I don't know what Tammy knew as far as past probations, all that stuff. I suspect he didn't go into that a lot with her, what he was teaching in these little groups. But I've wondered, did he bring up polygamy with her and she was not going to have that? And that maybe led to her demise because she wasn't going to be okay with that. I don't know. Those are just different things that I wondered if, and especially when I heard that Julie Rose say that about Emma, that Emma was concerned about him remarrying and bringing up polygamy. And man, did Chad do that to Tammy? Did he? Because I know men. I grew up in a war. I knew men that did that. They discovered that Joseph Smith was a polygamist. They believe in Joseph Smith, so they're going to be polygamists. They've left their families. Their wives didn't agree, so they left and became polygamists.
Validates their affair. Mm-hmm. And you said he was looking. You know that.
Yes, he had a source that knows said he did have, and Julie Rowe mentions this, that a woman in Arizona that he was texting was getting close to. And the person that told me this said it's so weird because she was another beautiful woman, well off. I go, what are they seeing that I am not seeing? But that the husband found out and he called Chad and he threatened him, leave my wife alone. So I think Chad was looking, and that was his ammo. He'd show, I've been married to you in a past life.
Been married you in a past life, and then he knows that polygamy is part of church history, and he could have approached Tammy. And you know what? He did manipulate Tammy well. He convinced her to move to Rexburg. He did have coercive control over her, so maybe he did think that he could convince her of polygamy. Yeah. And you've mentioned that she was depressed before, and
she was, and so I wish I knew what happened right before she was killed, because there was a coworker of hers that's just the day before, I think it was the day before Tammy died, or just shortly before Tammy died, that said she was off. She was not okay. And that coworker's like, what was going on? What did she know? What happened? And so that's just one of those things I've wondered. Did he approach her and say, hey, can you live this principle? I've got this woman. He, in his mind, had married Lori in the Arizona temple.
Right. They were already married.
Mind was already married to